Most people assume the only rule wizards follow around Muggles is don't do magic in front of them. That's not even close to the full picture. There is an entire legal infrastructure, international law, dedicated ministry departments, specialist memory operatives, creature regulations, currency controls, all working simultaneously to keep the magical world hidden. From the 1692 statute that started it all, to the unwritten daily etiquette wizards are expected to maintain without being told, today we're breaking down 10 of the most important rules governing wizard behavior in the Muggle world, and explaining what the books actually say about how they work. The International Statute of Secrecy. The foundational rule governing all wizard behavior in the Muggle world is the International Statute of Secrecy, passed in 1692. Before this law existed, magical people lived alongside non-magical communities with varying degrees of visibility. Wizards cured illnesses, adjudicated disputes, and in some cases, used their abilities to intimidate or govern Muggle populations. As witch hunts escalated during the 16th and 17th centuries, the magical community made a collective calculation. The only viable path to survival was total concealment. The Statute of Secrecy formalized that decision and made it legally binding across every wizarding nation. At its core, the statute requires that no witch or wizard reveal the existence of magic to Muggles. This covers every form of magical activity without exception: spellcasting, potion brewing, magical transportation, the existence of magical creatures, and even minor incidental magic visible to non-magical bystanders. A levitating object in public, an accidentally produced magical flame, a self-stirring cauldron left in view, all constitute violations if Muggles can witness them. The law is enforced by ministries and departments of magic in every country. In Britain, the Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes oversees compliance, with dedicated teams ready to respond to breaches. Punishments for violating the statute scale with the severity of exposure. Minor infractions carry fines. Significant breaches can result in imprisonment in Azkaban. In the most extreme cases, large-scale magical exposure, deliberate revelation to Muggles, a wizard can have their wand snapped, permanently removing their ability to practice magic. The harshness of the penalties reflects a simple institutional logic. The entire framework of the magical world depends on Muggle ignorance being maintained without exception. The trace on underage wizards. Separate from the general Statute of Secrecy provisions is the trace, a monitoring charm automatically applied to every witch or wizard under the age of 17. The trace detects magical activity in the vicinity of a minor and reports it to the Ministry of Magic's improper use of magic office. Its purpose is to prevent underage wizards from using magic outside of school, particularly in Muggle environments where magical activity is most likely to be witnessed. The mechanism of the trace is worth understanding precisely, because it is deliberately imprecise. The trace does not track the child. It detects magic performed in the area where an underage witch or wizard lives. This means the ministry cannot actually confirm who performed the magic, only that magic occurred near a minor. This is why Harry Potter received an official warning after Dobby performed a hover charm in the Dursleys' kitchen in his second year. The ministry detected magic in a Muggle household near an underage wizard, assumed the wizard was responsible, and issued the warning without investigating further. The same logic applied when Aunt Marge was accidentally inflated. The trace is enforced rigorously in Muggle households and environments, because these are the spaces where magical activity is most likely to be seen by people who should not see it. It is not actively enforced inside purely magical households, which is why children from wizarding families regularly produce uncontrolled bursts of magic at home without receiving ministry warnings. The risk of Muggle exposure in those environments is considered low enough to ignore. The trace lifts automatically at 17, the age of legal adulthood in the wizarding world, at which point witches and wizards are considered solely responsible for their own compliance with secrecy laws. Magical transportation in Muggle areas. Magical transportation poses some of the most immediate and visible risks to wizarding secrecy, and the rules governing it in Muggle areas are correspondingly strict. Apparition, the ability to vanish from one location and reappear in another, is explicitly forbidden in the presence of Muggles. A witch or wizard appearing from or disappearing into thin air on a public street, in a train station, or in any space frequented by non-magical people would constitute an unambiguous breach of the statute. Apparition is therefore restricted to discreet or shielded locations, and the skill itself is tightly regulated. full license is required to operate legally, earned through a ministry-run test. Portkeys. Ordinary-looking objects enchanted to transport anyone who touches them to a predetermined destination are also carefully controlled. The Department of Magical Transportation ensures that authorized portkeys are disguised as objects a Muggle would dismiss without curiosity. Old boots, discarded newspapers, innocuous rubbish. Unauthorized creation of portkeys is illegal, because an enchanted object left unattended in a Muggle area could result in a non-magical person activating it accidentally and being transported without explanation. The consequences of that scenario for secrecy maintenance are obvious. The Floo network, travel via magical fireplace, is restricted to fireplaces registered with and approved by the Ministry. Using Floo powder in an unregistered Muggle home is not permitted. This is why Harry's attempt to use the Floo network from the Dursleys' fireplace in his second year failed. The fireplace was blocked, unregistered, and entirely unsuitable for magical transport. The Hogwarts Express avoids all of this by operating through Platform 9 3/4, a concealed platform at King's Cross accessible only through a barrier that Muggle passengers cannot perceive. The night bus navigates Muggle traffic invisibly. Its sudden compressions and jumps explained away to any witnesses as unexplained gusts of wind or minor traffic incidents. The Misuse of Muggle Artifacts Office. The Ministry of Magic maintains an entire department dedicated to one specific problem: wizards enchanting Muggle objects in ways that create a secrecy risk. The Misuse of Muggle Artifacts Office investigates and prosecutes cases where ordinary Muggle items have been bewitched and left within reach of non-magical people. The principle is simple. A Muggle who encounters an object that behaves impossibly, a teapot that bites, a toilet seat that explodes, a car that flies, is a Muggle whose memory may need modification and whose neighbors are now potential witnesses. The rule applies regardless of whether the wizard intended any harm. An enchanted object that seems minor or amusing within a wizarding context can cause genuine disruption if it ends up accessible to Muggles. Arthur Weasley worked in this office for years and understood the principle thoroughly, which made his personal hobby of collecting and tinkering with Muggle objects considerably more ironic. The enchanted Ford Angilla he modified to fly became a direct case study in the rule's necessity. When the car became visible over London while Harry and Ron were flying it to Hogwarts, the Ministry launched an investigation and formally reprimanded Arthur. The car's subsequent escape into the Forbidden Forest resolved the immediate problem, but the breach of policy had already occurred. Punishments for misuse of Muggle artifacts violations range from fines for minor infractions to full criminal proceedings for cases involving significant exposure. A single charmed object that startles a Muggle can generally be managed with targeted memory modification. Repeated violations or wide-scale magical contamination of Muggle environments are treated as serious offenses under the broader Statute of Secrecy framework. Obliviators and memory modification. Even with comprehensive laws and strict enforcement, magical accidents in front of Muggles are inevitable. The wizarding world's response to this is the Obliviator, a specialist witch or wizard trained in the precise application of the Obliviate charm, which removes or modifies specific memories while leaving surrounding recollections intact. The Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes maintains a dedicated Obliviator team, and their work is constant. A well-executed Obliviate removes only the targeted memory. A Muggle who witnesses a wizard flying on a broomstick can have that specific moment erased cleanly, leaving the rest of their day entirely intact and coherent. For larger incidents involving multiple witnesses, Obliviators deploy in teams, coordinating to ensure consistent and compatible adjustments across multiple memories. The scale of the operation following the Death Eater attack at the 1994 Quidditch World Cup, which resulted in dozens of Muggle campers witnessing the dark mark conjured in the sky, is a demonstration of just how extensive these operations can become. The charm is not without risks. Improper application causes memory damage, leaving the subject disoriented or unable to form coherent recollections. Gilderoy Lockhart provides the cleanest cautionary example in the series. He had overused memory charms on others for years, appropriating their accomplishments, until Ron Weasley's broken wand caused the spell to backfire on him during their second year. Lockhart was left permanently unable to form or retain stable memories, a condition he had not recovered from by the end of the series. Obliviators undergo extensive specialized training to avoid exactly this outcome, but the risk is inherent to the magic itself. Magical creatures in Muggle areas. Magical creatures represent one of the most persistent threats to wizarding secrecy because they are, by nature, difficult to conceal. The Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures sets the rules. No magical creature may be kept, transported, or allowed to operate in Muggle areas without appropriate precautions, and several categories of creature are prohibited from Muggle environments entirely, regardless of precautions taken. Small magical animals, cats, toads, and even owls, can pass without attracting much attention in Muggle spaces, but owners are still expected to exercise discretion. Owls delivering posts through suburban streets can generate unwanted curiosity, and wizards in Muggle areas are advised to use less visible delivery routes. Larger and more visually distinctive creatures, hippogriffs, phoenixes, thestrals, cannot be kept anywhere near Muggle populations without heavy concealment enchantments, and even with those enchantments, the practical risk is considered unacceptably high. The Ministry's creature classification system runs from X, boring but safe, to Quintuple X, known Horror Killer. Class Quadruple X and Quintuple X creatures, including dragons, acromantulas, and basilisks, are strictly prohibited in Muggle environments. Breeding, trading, or releasing them in non-magical areas carries severe legal penalties. Hagrid's illegal Norwegian Ridgeback, Norbert, is a textbook case of why the rules exist. Raising a dragon at Hogwarts was dangerous to students in itself, but the Ministry's concern extended further. A dragon that escaped the castle and flew over Muggle territory would represent one of the most catastrophic secrecy breaches conceivable. Werewolves are subject to a separate set of regulations. Those known to be werewolves must register with the Ministry and are expected to take Wolfsbane potion during transformations, a requirement that significantly reduces the danger to both Muggle and wizarding populations. Compliance with this requirement was, throughout the series, inconsistent. Currency and Muggle economics. The wizarding world operates on its own currency: gold galleons, silver sickles, and bronze canutes, minted exclusively by Gringotts and inscribed with markings that identify them as magical in origin. Wizards are prohibited from attempting to spend galleons, sickles, or canutes in Muggle shops. The coins are visually distinct, made from unusual metals, and bear engravings that no Muggle mint has produced. Presenting one at a Muggle till would raise immediate questions. To spend money in the Muggle world legally, wizards must exchange their currency at Gringotts for standard Muggle notes and coins. The bank provides this service as a routine transaction. This rule exposes one of the most persistent structural gaps in wizarding education. Many pureblood families who have had minimal contact with the non-magical world for generations have only a vague understanding of how Muggle money, economics, or commerce actually functions. Arthur Weasley is the most visible example. His genuine enthusiasm for Muggle culture was not matched by his grasp of its practicalities. This is less amusing and more significant when you consider that any wizard who needs to operate in Muggle society without drawing suspicion must be able to use Muggle money, understand Muggle pricing, and behave in financial settings in a way that does not invite questions. A wizard producing a handful of galleons at a Muggle railway ticket office would attract exactly as much attention as one who produced a wand. Magical law enforcement in Muggle areas. When magical crimes occur in or near Muggle environments, the Ministry of Magic's law enforcement response must address two simultaneous priorities: stopping the magical threat and ensuring that no Muggle witnesses retain any memory of what they saw. The Department of Magical Law Enforcement deploys Aurors, trained dark wizard catchers, for these operations, but every such mission includes mandatory Obliviator coordination as a matter of protocol. If a dark wizard attacks in a Muggle town, the Aurors present must neutralize the threat and simultaneously coordinate memory modification for any witnesses, in whatever order circumstances allow. Buildings or structures damaged by magical combat must be repaired or explained before Muggles can investigate. Collapsed walls, fires, or infrastructure damage are attributed to Muggle world causes: gas explosions, structural failures, storm damage. Magical residue, unusual scorch marks, lingering enchantments, physical traces of spellwork, must be cleared before Muggle emergency services arrive. Any magical objects or creatures left at the scene must be retrieved. This explains why the Ministry's response to Harry inflating Aunt Marge was so immediate and so serious. A person visibly expanding and floating away in a suburban Muggle neighborhood could not simply be left. The Ministry dispatched a team immediately, retrieved Marge, deflated her, and modified her memory before she regained full awareness. The urgency of the response was not proportional to the scale of the magic used. It was proportional to the risk of Muggle witnesses. Wizards who ignore these protocols and leave magical evidence in Muggle areas can face Azkaban sentences or permanent restrictions on their magical practice. International rules and the Confederation of Wizards. The Statute of Secrecy is not a British law administered by the British Ministry of Magic. It is an international framework overseen by the International Confederation of Wizards, ensuring consistent standards of concealment across every country where magical communities exist. The Confederation's purpose is to prevent a patchwork situation, where wizards in one country operate with significantly greater openness than wizards in another, creating pressure on the overall global concealment effort. International Quidditch is subject to specific regulations under this framework. Matches cannot take place anywhere that Muggles might witness them. The 1994 Quidditch World Cup in Britain required elaborate concealment enchantments covering an entire campsite and stadium. The ministry officials monitoring the perimeter throughout the event. When Death Eaters attacked following the final, conjuring the dark mark over the campsite, the resulting exposure required a ministry-scale response involving dozens of Obliviators working across multiple witnesses simultaneously. Different wizarding nations interpret the statute's provisions with varying degrees of strictness. In the United States, as depicted in the Fantastic Beasts era, the Magical Congress of the United States of America enforced significantly stricter rules than Britain, including a prohibition on socializing with no-mages, the American term for Muggles. This was not simply cultural preference. It reflected a different historical threat environment and a different assessment of the risk that interaction between magical and non-magical people represented. Magical creatures being transported internationally require specific clearances, and any internationally organized wizarding gathering must be concealed from Muggle populations through a combination of wards, charms, and physical relocation to areas with no Muggle presence. Everyday etiquette in Muggle society. Beyond the specific legal requirements enforced by the ministry, witches and wizards living near Muggles are expected to follow unwritten rules of daily behavior that reduce the ambient risk of discovery. The most immediately obvious of these concerns: clothing. Traditional wizarding attire, robes, pointed hats, cloaks with unusual embellishments, is distinctly unusual in Muggle public spaces and draws immediate attention. Witches and wizards are expected to wear standard Muggle clothing when moving through non-magical environments. Pureblood families who have had limited contact with Muggle culture frequently get this wrong. Outdated outfits, mismatched items, or obvious unfamiliarity with contemporary Muggle fashion conventions betray their backgrounds instantly. Language and conversational references are equally significant. A wizard who casually mentions Gringotts, Floo powder, or Diagon Alley in front of a Muggle colleague has already made a mistake. Families with Muggle-born members tend to adjust naturally, having grown up navigating both worlds. Pureblood households, by contrast, often lack even basic familiarity with Muggle vocabulary, technology, or cultural reference points, a gap that becomes immediately apparent in conversation. Witches and wizards interacting with Muggle neighbors or coworkers are expected to limit references to wizarding life entirely. Habitual magic convenience also needs to be suppressed in Muggle environments. Lighting a wand in a public space, summoning an object across a room, using magic to accelerate cooking or cleaning. These are low-stakes actions in a purely wizarding context, but in a mixed environment, they constitute statute violations if witnessed. Children raised in wizarding families are taught from an early age that restraint in magical use is not optional. It is the central practical discipline of living near Muggles. The responsibility for maintaining this falls primarily on individual families rather than on ministry enforcement. Parents are expected to raise children who understand how fragile the separation between the two worlds is, and how much sustained effort it takes to maintain. If you made it this far, you already know how seriously the books take the details. So you'll want to see what I found in the new HBO trailer, because they've already made some choices that don't quite add up. That video is up now.